All right, everybody, welcome to the Mindful SRNA RRNA podcast, where we are going to be talking about relationships in CRNA school. And in particular, today, we're going to talk about being married in CRNA school. So I have Kate and her husband, Zachary, here, who have been gracious and very willing to share their experience with all of you. So I'm so excited because CRNA school can really put a strain on relationships. I detail all my gory CRNA schools in a relationship issues in a live. I will link that in the show notes below. But I had broke up with my boyfriend before school. We had an it's complicated situation in school, and then we ended up getting married later. So I get it. It can be icky, right? It can be hard. It can be difficult going through the things. And it's not uncommon for people to break up, to get divorced, even actually get married in CRNA school, because your life is still going to continue on while you're in school. So for some people, I feel like relationships can get incredibly complicated, especially if you're not aligned with your significant other. So we're going to talk about that a little bit with y'all, because if it doesn't come up before, it's going to come up later and in hardships in general. So exactly. So we gotta clean that up. So we'll talk about that. And then Kate, I just want to focus on you for a second here, just to kind of give everybody kind of the bird's eye view of your journey. But we started working together. It was in 2021. You reached out to me. We were getting your applications ready, CV, personal statement reviews, all the thing. And I think you got married. Didn't you get married while you were getting the apps in? Like you were doing the apps, you got married. Yep. You got interviews. You were waitlisted. We did a mock. And then eventually you got into your number one pick. And I think this was like a 3-month kind of time span. Like you were just doing all the things. So
very quick. Yes.
It was like you were on the ride. So walk me through like your journey to CRNA school, kind of whatever you're comfortable sharing, how many schools you applied to, ICU experience, all that good stuff.
Yeah. So thank you again for having us, by the way.
Yes,
so I started out, my original plan actually, before I even thought CRNA school, wanted to apply, all the things, I wanted to go to NP school originally. I knew I always wanted to advance my education some way. I knew that bedside wasn't my end goal. I knew there was a need in my immediate community. My parents are in a rural area. I knew there was a need there, and I wanted to find a way to kind of serve them in a way and serve more vulnerable populations. And so I thought NP was the way to go. However, I ended up actually getting surgery after a knee injury, and my anesthesiologist actually allowed me to shadow him, and he was my introduction into CRNAs, basically. So I ended up veering off the path of NP and going to CRNA.
Nice.
So I did not know what a CRNA was up until that point. That was 2020, and I graduated nursing school in 2018. So I went my whole nursing career, my whole first 2 years of nursing not knowing what it was at all. So I applied to 7 schools because I was fearful that I was not going to get in. I had a 3.6 GPA. I had 4 years of nursing experience in 2 major ICUs, one a CVICU is my primary background, and one at a very major medical center in downtown Dallas is my primary experience. So we did all the things: open hearts, balloon pumps, Impellas, CRT, ECMO, and it was definitely during COVID when that was all popping up too. And then my original plan was to stay in Texas. I wanted to stay in Texas. That was the plan. However, I did get waitlisted. I ended up getting admitted later, but it was not at a site that I desired to go to. And my husband is actually from Birmingham, Alabama. He's born and raised, grew up there, and they had a financial incentive for students to go to school there. And so I ended up applying, just kind of a shot in the dark, got in, and we couldn't pass up the financial opportunity to go because they were offering, basically it was like a loan repayment program. And so I had to take it. So we ended up doing that.
Yeah, I love that. Now, Zach, what do you do for a living?
I work in learning and development. So kind of a combination, an interesting career path. Started out in leadership development and higher education. But as she was getting into the realm of pursuing a doctorate or pursuing continuing education, I knew that I needed some sort of career that was going to be able to move because working at a university and only having a single income from a university salary is not going to nearly pay enough. and they're also very location based, but knowing that we would be potentially moving once, maybe twice, for the clinical rotations and things like that, I sort of started to pivot over into professional education and learning and development. So currently I work with a startup that provides these services to professional service firms like accounting firms, legal practices. And yeah, I've been with them for about a year after having worked in kind of human capital for an accounting firm. So the last couple of years, I've actually been fully remote. So yeah.
Nice. So you've been remote, which is nice. What did that look like for you? So Kate comes to you and she's like, hey, I want to be a CRNA and I'm going to take on 6 figures of debt. I'm not going to be able to work. What's up? So what were you thinking as she's doing all the things?
Well, that's a great question. I would say that we had started having those conversations before we got married. And I think we both knew that about each other, is that we wanted to continue our education, to develop, and to not necessarily be the top of our careers in terms of compared to others, but top of our career field in terms of educations that could be pursued. And so knowing that, I actually, when I was interviewing for an advanced role at the university I was working at before, I mentioned to them that, hey, we very well could be moving out of state in the next 2 years or so, depending on what program she gets accepted to. And I won't say that that was a reason that the position wasn't offered to me, but I feel like it is one of the reasons that they didn't end up making a hire for that role anyway. And so, it was a kind of a thought of, how do I continue to develop in my career alongside her while she's going through this program, which is going to have any types of programs, doctoral programs are going to take a lot of resources up. And so, yeah, it was a few months of kind of introspection of what can I do that is something that I'm passionate about and find purpose in my work, while still being in an atmosphere that's going to benefit both of us in the long run. And I would say that I've been very fortunate and blessed to find these roles, specifically the last 2 roles that I've had that have been fully remote, because of how it has enabled us to be able to move around and transition, and even given me the flexibility to kind of take on additional responsibilities around the house while I knew that she was going to be jumping into this career journey. So
I love that. I love that. Actually, and I really want you guys to hear that, because everyone's like, marriage is compromise. It is. And there's high seasons, there's low seasons. But what I really love about this is like the question, like, how do I continue developing myself alongside her developing her? Like, I love that. And I love that you were, and not even that, I wouldn't say you took a back seat, but you were able to like pivot and shift. Like, okay, I might not get this role. It might not look like this, but she's going to be going this way, so I can still develop, I can still grow. And I feel like I coach on this all the time. What can I do with what I have here? Right. And so I love that. And I feel like that's got to be a really big strength, like in y'all's relationship, is like that point. Yeah. So is there any, like, now, do you feel, is there any resentment? Is there anything that's like or are you just like, we decided to do this, let's go? I see you guys making eyes.
I'll answer that one to make sure we're on the same page.
No, there is no resentment. Again, thinking about the perspective of realizing this at the beginning of the conversation, at the beginning of our relationship, understanding the drive that she had, that was sort of, it made the next few steps not a surprise. And so realizing like, hey, there's going to be pivots that need to be made, but also knowing, even if, for instance, I was unable to find a job for 6 months or a year or something like that, realizing that the career journey that she was on, the student loans we'd have to take on, additional things like that, would still be worth it in the end because of where we're getting to in that moment. And I would kind of put a caveat to that, in that it's a very tricky explanation to make as the spouse when it comes to talking with your employer or potential employers. So you have to be good about telling the story of your career journey and where you're hoping to go, while still being honest and upfront. I was very fortunate enough to be able to talk to my employer at the time when we were going to have to make this move from Dallas to Birmingham. I went in and just was open and honest with my employer, which some people advised against, but I believed, I was like, if I'm honest about what I'm doing and what we have going on, it will get returned correctly. And so they were like, hey, we get that. Thank you. I gave them about a month's notice that we were going to be moving, or 6 weeks notice. And from that conversation and talking with other leadership within that organization, they were the ones that actually helped me connect with my next job.
Nice.
So as much as it's like a scary world where people feel like, hey, I have to be secretive about my employment, sure, that might be the process that's necessary for some individuals. Yeah. But another perspective, my perspective at least, is sometimes when you're honest with the leadership in your organizations and when you're having those conversations and telling your story, people are happy to help out, and you can end up in the roles that you were looking for to continue to advance. So
yeah, for sure.
And I love that. And I think too, I want you guys to hear, like, they were just looking ahead. And I've actually been talking about this. We can focus so much on the past and like the gap from where we are to where we want to be. But they were like, you know what? Like, he was like, literally, this is going to work out in the end. It might be messy. I might lose jobs, but I love the forward projection forward you guys have, which I think is so important, almost to have like that vision together in a marriage. So it's like, we're going to go through some hard times right now. We're going to be walking into that, but this is where we're going forward. And I think, Zach, I like that you weren't looking from lack. You were looking towards abundance. Like, this is going to work out. I'm going to find a job. I'm going to be honest. I'm going to be authentic. I'm going to be real. And I know, like, I'm going to be met on the other side with that. So I think that is like, I hope y'all are taking notes and hear this, because this is so good, of like looking forward to where we're going, like that vision and walking together. So love that. Kate, tell me about, where are you at? So you guys were in Texas, correct? And then you obviously went to Alabama. You guys are in Alabama now. So you guys had to move. Do you have family in Alabama, or because you were, right? Zach, you have family. Do you have family there or no?
Yeah, so I grew up in Birmingham, which is the city we ended up moving to. We are actually back in Dallas now. So we just ended up moving again for her to finish out her clinicals. But I grew up in the same city. It was interesting to get back as an adult, because she was, I think the first week we were there, she goes, well, where should we go to dinner or whatever? You know this place. And I was like, actually, I don't, because one, I've been gone for 10 years or so. Yeah. And two, my experience with this city and with individuals in the city was when I was in high school. Yeah. And that meant I was, driving a couple of miles, going to watch movies and not doing much else apart from just kind of the high school life. And so going back as an adult, and also knowing that, my family, as they've continued to grow and they've gone into their relationships and things like that, have moved around. So while I have 4 other siblings, but only one of them is actually living in Birmingham. And so the rest of them have moved kind of a couple states away or things like that. So
perfect.
Yes, still family and extended family, friends as well in that area, but it was a different experience moving back there. So
I can definitely attest to that too. So so you moved, you left, you moved back, and now you move back again. So another big strain on y'all's relationship as well. So kudos to y'all. That's, moving is rough. It is. Kate, so tell me about, like, what year are you in CRNA school? Sure. What are you loving about it? What are you struggling with?
I'm a third-year nurse anesthesia student. I currently go to school at Stanford University, so again in Birmingham. Another close school is UAB, so if you haven't heard of Stanford, UAB is the next closest in proximity. What I love about it, I kind of went in with the mentality of, I just want to check it out and see what they have to offer. And I came out loving my faculty, loving them. They were so supportive, and I knew going into moving, 1, and 2, going through didactic and what the rigor that is, going through didactic, going through 5 courses, 6 courses per semester. I knew I was going to have some type of support. Now, I knew they weren't going to handhold me through it, but I knew that if I was struggling in whatever way, I could send them a text. I could send them an email. I could sit down in their office, go through my, exams if I didn't do well for whatever reason, or go through assignments, and even get questions answered for whatever topic we were discussing. They were open door policy all the time. And I loved that. And I knew, and that was also represented in their attrition rates, 0% in the last 5 years, which is fantastic. And so, granted, attrition numbers, you have to take into consideration the class size. For one person in a 10-person class, it's 10% versus, one person in a 100-person class, right? 1%. So you have to take that in consideration. But I love my faculty. I did like the area, and I loved the clinical rotations that they had here. I had a opportunity to do a ton of regional, and that was something that obviously perked my interest because of my past experience and why I wanted to go anesthesia in the first place. And they had clinical rotations that offered a ton of regional. So that was a large reason that pulled me out of Texas into Alabama. So what's hard about it now, I think the hardest part was one, didactic. I think that's obvious because it's hard. It's the rigor. That's not necessarily school specific. I think a lot of the hardest part was mostly being away from my friends and my family and our couple friends that we're really close with, and having to really pour into that in a different way, be that text message, be that FaceTime, traveling when we're coming back from, breaks between semesters, and making sure that we're being intentional with our time with them during those breaks. And so sometimes I'll see our couple friends once, it was once a year, twice a year when we're visiting family. And so just being intentional with our time, that was definitely really hard, and making sure I wasn't losing those connections while also trying to build new connections in a new environment with people I don't know, haven't met before. In most cases, some of these nurses had already worked together. They came from the same unit. They went to the same college. They went to the same high school in some cases. And so I kind of came in almost an outsider in this case. So it was definitely a little bit more challenging, but, I got close with a couple girls in my class, and that's honestly really what you need. As much as I loved the majority of my people in my class, I got really close with 2 or 3, and I was okay with that. So yeah.
Yeah, I love that. You just need like 1 or 2. Like you just need a couple people you can just hold on to. You guys can float and raft and try to get through it together.
You can vent, you can cry, you can
yes.
Go to the movies or whatever you need to do to decompensate, or not decompensate, but decompress. There you go.
Decompress. There you go.
Yeah, decompensate.
You feel like you're decompensating, so it's fine. It's awesome.
Decompress for sure. Whatever you need to do. But those two or 3 people, really, I was texting them all the time, even in clinical. Like, is this normal? Like, am I crazy? And just like going over, anesthetic plans and making sure, like, for this lap chole, we're going to do this, right? Especially in the first 2 weeks, you're like, I don't know how to do this.
Nothing. Yeah. Nothing. It's eyes wide open. Like, oh my God.
Exactly.
So my husband's also not medical at all. And obviously Zach's not medical. How has it been difficult for you in like supporting her, I guess? Or how are you kind of supporting her? Has it kind of been difficult?
This is funny because we just had a conversation about this yesterday, last night at dinner. And this it was, go ahead.
So I would say that it feels difficult in ways to make them, like your significant other, feel like you understand and hear what they're going through. Because whenever I would like try and say back, hey, this is what I hear, you're saying, she's like, no, that's not it. And I'm like, okay, well, give me some room here, because I know I'm not using all the correct terms when I'm talking about what you're looking for in an ideal employer, or I know that I'm not using all the right terms when I'm talking about the struggles that you're going through in the hospital, but I think by and large, I can kind of get the gist of it. You have to just give me some wiggle room. And so, that was kind of our conversation last night in terms of talking about
employers,
what she's looking for in an ideal employer. And she was like, I need some help kind of processing through this. And so I was like, okay, if I'm hearing you correctly, your number one priority is finding the location that's going to offer the types of practices and cases that you want to do, and kind of, and he, again, ended up using some of the incorrect terms, and she was like, no, you're not getting it. And I was like, I am though. I understand what you're saying. Let me. So yes, it was, and I think that's been kind of the trick of it, is like, she's like, well, this is what I'm struggling with, or I'm frustrated about this. She'll give me a call like when she's at a rotation that, is far away. And so I'm like, okay, so you're frustrated with the, people who you're shadowing, or you're frustrated with the surgeons that are in the room, or you're frustrated with the support staff that are in the room.
Everybody.
Who are you frustrated with? And it's like, actually, no, I'm frustrated because they put me on the wrong side. And I'm like, okay, well, who can you call about that? She's like, no one. I'm like, well, okay, then you're talking to me, and we're going to figure it out together. Yeah. So the support has been, I feel like it is a worthwhile pursuit. It is a difficult pursuit when it feels like one person feels like they're missing what the other person is saying. regardless of whether or not you're saying it correctly, you're just like, I was like, I'm just using lay people terms. So please let me just like do that. Like 95% of the population would get what I'm saying.
Yeah.
But you and the other 5% of CRNA students are going to say, no, you're wrong. I'm like, well, that's right. Okay. So I'm wrong.
Yeah.
I want to add to that as well.
Yeah.
I think a lot of the hard part about being in healthcare in general is we're so quick to rely on the people who are in healthcare because they automatically get it. They see the day-to-day, they see the in and out, they understand the kind of the nuances of dealing with different personalities. But I think what happens in translation is when we don't bring out, and this is a realization after the conversation we had last night, not bringing in your spouse kind of prevents them from developing ways or finding ways to support you. And then it kind of builds this weird wall between you where it makes it a little bit more difficult to be vulnerable because you automatically go into conversation with the mindset of, oh, they don't get it and they're not going to get it. And it's too hard to explain. So I just need to go to somebody else and talk to them because they get it. Someone in healthcare. And I feel like I don't know. I think that makes your spouse not find ways to support you. And it makes it hard to communicate your needs, especially when you're in school in the thick of it. And in states of when you're studying for the C, on top of doing DMP, on top of doing clinical, on top of doing 4 courses, it can get very daunting. And now you're in this area and you haven't been able to communicate that. And now your spouse doesn't know how to help you because you haven't been introducing them to all of this at all. You've just been kind of shoveling that onto maybe your friends or maybe your old nursing friend that's also in school with you.
Yeah. No,
that's good.
Totally agree with that.
Yeah. I really like that.
Invest in getting the conversation to a place where the other can understand it.
Yeah.
Yes.
And that takes time. And that's not something that you can have one conversation and he's automatically going to get it. It may be cues and reminders like, oh, remember that this means this, the surgeon is this, the anesthesiologist is this, the CRNA is this. So it's explaining, but once they get it, for the most part, they're like, okay, I know how to help you now. I know what these roles are. I know these different types of not cases per se, but just different nuances of healthcare. You just kind of have to take the time to explain it.
Can't be done during a session where you need to vent because
that is true.
They're trying to explain it while you're trying to vent.
Yeah.
So yes,
exactly.
no one getting supported there. So.
Yeah. And I actually think that's so good. For those listening too, is remember, set your significant other up for success for the beginning, from the beginning, and let them know your role and what you're doing. These are just conversations you can have so that when it gets heavy and you're I literally reminded me back to, it was my last 2 weeks of CRNA school. I had the worst day ever. I got in some fight with a circulator over a bear hugger. And I just remember I quit. I texted my assistant program director and quit. I said, I quit. I said, I'm done. This is not worth it. I hate everybody. I drove home angry tears. When you're just crying because you're angry, but you're not sad. And I remember we had this nasty little studio apartment, one TV. It was so gross. And I just remember I walked in full rage, anger. And I remember he was just in the corner I don't even know what to do. I'm I quit. I wanted to watch Project Runway. That was my safe space thing. And I remember he just sat there and was blinking. I think I put on gospel music, Project Runway, and was sitting on the floor crying. And I really think he was and I was what was I going to say? I'm well, it was this bear hugger. He'd be what are you even talking about right now? Yeah. So oh my God, over a damn bear hugger. I lost my entire mind. But I like that because it's give them a chance to understand, see their effort. And I think that's anything with marriage is seeing what the other person is capable of in that moment and respecting that. And it might not be how you want it, but appreciating that they are making an effort to understand and you're giving them room to understand as well. I think that's actually very beautiful. And even just the power of listening, and not, because even though I know you men, I love the TikToks out there with the guys trying to they're fix it all the time. And it's no, I just want you to say that she sucks and is ugly and just agree with me. That's it.
Exactly.
But that's husbands. They want to fix and they want to do that. So I think even too, just remembering that listening is just even so powerful on both sides of the equation, for sure.
And communication is so powerful. It really is. It's kind everything. He's really good and he's always been really good at it. I know for some, communication takes time. Like me, I have never been like the best communicator with my emotions or my feelings or anything like that. And so he's really good at prompting. He's like, do you need to vent or do you want me to figure it out? And that kind of navigates two different paths for us of how this conversation is going to go. If I just need to vent, he'll let me scream it out and he'll be like, okay, I totally agree. I'll go. Yeah. That girl sucks, you know? Or that person is annoying. But if it's kind of like, okay, let's figure this out. Let's kind of dissect it. If I have the emotional capability in that time, because sometimes you come home from clinical and you're just emotionally drained, like you can't do it anymore.
Yeah.
But if I have room in my tank to where we can sit down and have that conversation, then we'll go down that path. And he's really good at kind of like, I think I see what you're saying. What about this? How can we navigate it this way? Maybe you should have a conversation with this person who can then have another conversation with that. You know, he's really, really good at kind of navigating the puzzle pieces of that conversation, if that's the road that's at that time more appropriate to go down.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's not always the road.
Sometimes you just gotta let us go. Just let us go. Like my husband just sat in the he was like in the kitchen, was just like watching the full on show. He was like, I'm not gonna touch that right now. And it was for the best. So how do you guys stay connected? Like, how do you not talk about anesthesia in school and all this stuff? Like, how do you guys stay connected? And even talking about like the different transitions from starting CRNA school to clinical, like, walk me through that.
I think so. What really happened, and I think what really set up from like success from the get-go, is understanding our end goal, looking more long-term and not short-term. And so that allowed us to stay focused a lot. And, you know, we called our move a business trip. This is a business trip. This is a short-term thing. We knew that we wanted to come back. Our family's here. Our primary friend group is here, even though his family is there. So there is a sense of comfort that came to it. It wasn't completely random. So we treated it as a business trip. And in that business trip, we found ways, whether that be the movies, whether that be going to the park. We found this amazing park where we could take our dog, and we went there multiple times a week so that we could, you know, sometimes that was just a decompression for me, especially during didactic, where I would spend anywhere between 10, 12 hours just sitting on my butt studying. And he would pull me away. He's like, let's go to the park with, you know, Maverick, our dog, or let's go for a walk, or let's go, you know, we've had these 3 or 4 core restaurants that we would go to, and those were our restaurants. Those were our places. And we got really close with a lot of the staff there because we go there all the time, because that was a place for us to connect and have conversation outside of anesthesia, to enjoy a meal with each other, to not be just bogged down by, you know, school and work and sometimes family affairs if those erupted. What about you?
Yeah, I would agree with all of that. Going back to the business trip mentality, it was sort of that mindset of like you're going on a business trip. If you're in a city where your friends are and you can see them during your time away from your primary responsibility, great, do it. But if not, there's no harm, no foul, no sort of sense of guilt. And so that's kind of what I would remind her of. For me, it was a little bit easier because I had friends in the city that when she would be studying late, I could be like, all right, I'm going to go watch the game with my buddy, because that allows you to not feel like you're keeping me back from spending time with people. And it allows me to kind of get out of the house and have some of that extra just core conversation. So if it's just the unit of us two and I'm able to get outside of it, then it allows her to kind of also have some quiet time to herself. But in terms of the connecting, the term best laid plans comes to mind here, because we would plan on things and some of those would work really well. Sometimes they wouldn't follow through, because it was sort of a mindset of neither of us are really like gifted at doing all of the planning and social planning and things like that. Sometimes we have friends that tell us about things and then we go do things like that.
Sure.
But neither of us are like, yes, you know what? I'm going to plan our social calendar for the entire year and we're going to be great because we're going to do a million things. So we sort of set out to be like, hey, this is going to be sort of a shared responsibility because we don't want one person to feel like they're doing it all and the other person isn't. So it was sort of a once a month, each of us plans a date night, and then didn't again, that was the plan. Didn't happen perfectly every time, but it was one of, we plan a date night for once a month, and we kind of rotate back and forth on who's doing that. And then it's also once a week we're doing one sort of dinner outside of the home if possible, to just have some quiet time, not talking about work or school, but talking about just life in general. And so often the conversation would still somehow get back to work or school, but that's the human nature.
Normal. Yeah.
Like, I would say that feeling that, because again, it's that mindset of, if you feel like you're the burden, or you are burdening, or you're carrying the burden, there's resentment opportunities there. And so the hope is that when you feel like something is shared in terms of the responsibility, it's less of an opportunity for one person to feel resentful towards the other. So
for sure.
I love that. I love that you just said that, because that's like the thing is, I think a lot of couples get that resentment thing. Is how I brought it up kind of earlier, is because, and I just you guys just gave the most beautiful solution for it. And I think even when I was in CRNA school, I mean, like I said, it's a complicated situation. But we would try like once a week to just do something fun, like just get out of the house, explore. I was like Boston, Rhode Island area, and explore. And I think that was just so crucial. And even before clinical is like, I know I couldn't sustain this, but for a few months there, when I was at a home clinical site, my clinical site was 2 seconds down the road. We would get up at 4 or 5 a.m. and work out together. And even just that working out, you know what I mean? Like, you're just still with your person, whatever. So I think that's just so crucial, of getting yourselves out of it. And Zach, with that being said, was it hard when she because I know you can get in the study mode and you can get in the zone, and like, you're like, leave me alone. Like, was it hard to kind of pull her out of that sometimes and be like, let it go? Because I mean, sometimes you just can't, like, I yell at people all the time. I'm like, you're not going to study for 12 hours. It's not going to work. Like, so how was that?
Kind of two parts, I would say, to that. First is like the actually pulling her out of it, to like on purpose. And then the second part would be kind of the accidental, if I distracted her, then the reaction that I would receive would be like, oh gosh, then I'd be, wait a minute, no, we don't need to be frustrated about this because you have been studying for too long. So pulling her outside of it, it was kind of a thing of feeling like, in moments I was like, I know that you need this, you have to trust me. But then at the same time, if I was still like kind of push and say, hey, let's go to the park right now, and she's like, no, I can't. And I'm like, okay, I have to trust you in this moment, and I have to believe that you know what you're needing for this time, and you're going to take this opportunity to continue studying or whatever it is that you're doing. And then so kind of a little bit back to the connection though, and kind of talking about the second piece that you just asked. Because I worked from home, I had my whole computer set up and everything like that. And then I had some buddies who live across the country, and one of the ways that I keep in touch with them is we play some games online. But she, wanting to be close and connected, was like, I don't want you putting your setup in a different room. I want ours next to each other. But that doesn't work very well when I'm with a headset on talking to my friends and she's glaring at me. Not glaring all the time, but sometimes, like, I'll be like, oh, I just think she's really loud, and I'll look over to the left, and then she's got like, hey, darts. I'm trying to focus here. And so it was like, okay, I get that you're trying to focus, but also you've been doing this for a long time. So this is a time that you should go get your computer, and you should also play some games to take a step back. And so that's a little bit about the connection that I never ended up moving my desk out. So we had our desks in the same room for the entire 2 years that we were there. Still surprised that never ended up happening in terms of moving one desk to another room or not, but it worked. And it was a trick to pull her out of it sometimes. I don't think that I ever got it right. I was probably less than 50% of the time right. So basically I could have flipped a coin and done a better job of getting it out when I needed to. So
and I think it also happened, like, it's also the season that you're
marriage,
in.
100%.
Marriage, exactly. I think he knew when finals came around, it's not, you can't
forget it,
and that was okay. I also think a lot of it had to deal with me dealing with more of a mental anxiety and kind of leveling out my expectations of myself. And so once I was able to kind of drop those, I don't know what mentality kind of possessed me to think I needed to get a 4.0 in graduate school. I don't know what the thought was, to be completely honest with you.
Everybody
Maybe
has it. That's why I'm like,
exactly. And I think it was more of a way to prove to others, because I had a couple like nursing people or, people in leadership who told me that, I probably wouldn't do well in CRNA school for whatever reason. And that was probably their own vendetta or some own self-confidence issues that they had that they projected onto me. But it really did kind of eat at me when we moved. And so I was going to be like, watch me. I had that mentality of just saying, watch me come out of this, proving all of you wrong. And so that kind of made me go like basically knees deep in a lot of this. And so that was eating at me, but also the wanting the proximity, the closeness to be with him, while him saying, hey, you need to touch some grass. Like, it's really okay. And so how did I level that out? And other times were better than, most of the time around finals. And I think it was all I needed to do was pass. Once I was able to kind of get that mentality into my brain and let it kind of seep in and marinate, I was okay getting an 89. I was okay with that. I could be okay with that. It's not going to dictate how good of a CRNA I'm going to be if I don't know everything there is to know about the GI system. I'm
there
okay.
it is. It
I
is.
will learn that, and it'll come around in boards, and I will learn that, and I'll tackle those hard concepts later. But if that's going to be a sacrifice, if that's going to be a limiting factor in me being a good wife, a good daughter, I've got to re-level out my priorities a little bit. If I'm studying 40, 50, 60 hours a week and I'm not spending any time with him, we've got some issues. Because I don't want to neglect my marriage with him to then be this 4.0 student that then leaves, potentially divorced at the end of this.
Yeah. And I like that because there's a huge cost in so many ways of doing this program together, but it's like that chasing that perfection, that when your goal is to prove somebody wrong and you're doing something for somebody else, you're always going to burn out every time.
Exactly.
And I think I coach on that all the time. You're just going to burn
Exactly.
yourself out. But if you're like, wait a second, I can be a great CRNA with a B average. I can be an amazing CRNA. I can be a good wife. Like, you just have to look at all the pieces of the puzzle. And again, like you said, there's seasons. Finals week is just what it is. It's a week of you got to just take it for what it is. You get a little bit of chance to reset. And so I think moving with the ebb and flows of the seasons, like even like talking with your spouse okay, this is a semester coming up. This is what we're looking at. Maybe we can plan something here. This month, I'm probably going to be a little out, and just giving each other like a lot of grace. But I love that is like, what is good enough? Like, what is going to be good enough where you can still be a good wife in this season? Like, it's not, you're not going to be the same wife today that you are in a year from now. Like, you're not, you know what I mean? And that's exciting. But I think that's true. It's a huge cost, but don't let it literally take your entire life. Like, out.
And this isn't to say that Zach and I have this perfect marriage, that we communicate well all the time. I mean, we still argue, we still have disagreements of how to navigate certain areas of our life. But, I think a lot of it comes down to where can we compromise in that? Like, we have to meet somewhere in the middle, whether that may be leaning more to his perspective, being like an 80-20% rule, or maybe 30-70. Like, sometimes we don't agree on everything. It's just a matter of, what is okay? What can we settle with right now? He's a lot better at it than I am with settling, like kind of rounding out the point and be like, okay, what is good enough in this moment? What can we get us by until like the next month or the next 3 months or the next 4 months? And then we can table this and check back in later if we need to.
Yeah.
And he's really good at doing, another thing that he's really good at is frequent check-ins, most emotionally. He'll be like, okay, how are you physically? How are you mentally? How are you emotionally? How are you spiritually?
Love that.
And sometimes that comes across. It depends on it depends on the season. Sometimes it's like, if we're in a low season where school's not as demanding, I'm feeling pretty good. And then if it's in a season that we had just gone through and I was traveling, I was gone for 4 months, literally. And I would come back on the weekends and be with him as much as I could while I was also studying. And he'd check and he'd be like, okay, how are you mentally? How are you physically? How are you emotionally? How are you spiritually? He was really good at that. And so that kind of dictated whether or not we needed to spend more time together, or if I needed to contact like my clinical coordinator and see if I can get a site change. Because if I was not mentally able to have like a coherent conversation with him, something is wrong. Or if I came out emotionally burnt out, or if I was constantly calling him and saying, oh, these people are so annoying, or I'm really frustrated at this clinical site, or I feel like I'm dumb, or I feel like I'm going to be a terrible CRNA. Is it me or is it the environment that I'm in that's making me feel that way? So frequent check-ins, he was really good at that.
Yeah. I might jump in real quick just to say, you talked about seasons, and I think that's a term that she and I have used a lot, but also a recognition of like seasons within seasons, and kind of recognizing how priorities can shift for a season or two, right? Like the long-term priority would be our marriage,
right,
over career, right? And so, but realizing that in a smaller season, the priority of our marriage might move down a rung for the chaos and journey of the career in that moment. However, realizing though that there is a time that it has to reset. And so kind of pushing for that, I think, has been something that I felt I had to do a little bit more for her to then be able to process it and receive it. Because no one wants to hear, hey, I'm still not feeling prioritized, or I'm not feeling loved. That's a tough thing to hear.
That's hard.
And no one wants to then also feel it, kind of like she would say, like, I just feel like I'm not being a good wife right now. And I'm like, I don't need you to be a great wife right now. What I need you to do is get your work done so that you can get to a place where you feel more comfortable with the responsibilities you have. And then in a month's time, a week's time, whatever it is, you can feel like, oh, hey, I can take on more household responsibilities, whatever it is. So yeah, it's like the seasons within seasons and the shift in priorities of those two.
I love
so
that. Yeah. I love that. And I think too, even I feel like you just kind of answered that question before I even asked it, is about talking about being apart on weekends, but I feel like that's how you do it. You know what I mean? And you make use of what you have, the season within the season, checking with her, making sure, because like, as you know, with my platform, I'm all about a mental and emotional health. I'm like, none of this is worth ruining your mental emotional health. Like that is like the hill I will live and die on. And I think too, like that, I forget which like relationship place says this, but basically when you make, like, you just have to have enough good deposits into your marriage. So like when a few pennies or quarters, like, or silver dollars come out, you still got some money in there. You still got, so it's like making those deposits in, so you're not constantly draining, filling up. So I really love that.
No bounce checks. I don't think we ever
exactly. Let's not.
That's a term that should be perfect. Is have enough in there from built up from the things that you're doing beforehand, whatever it is.
Yeah, like the things you're doing. So we didn't even get to like talk about this because we kind of like, it was so good, we like dived in. But how long? So how did you guys meet? So tell me how you guys met.
Do you want to go, or do you want me to? I can make it more succinct. You'll make it more amazing.
Yeah. Okay, that's
fair.
Yes, we were both in college. I was at Alabama. She was at Baylor. Both doing our undergrads. I was 2 years ahead of her, but I had gotten connected through some friends at Bama to a camp in East Texas. And so I went out there for a summer. And then the second summer that I went out to work was between my junior and senior year. And she was between her freshman and sophomore year. And this would be my second summer. It was a faith-based camp, and both of us sharing that same faith. So for me, I was kind of like, this is a fantastic place where literally everyone, I mean, they kind of do all of the recruitment of your potential spouses for you that you would ever need. Yeah. So basically everyone was a marriage prospect at that point.
You're like,
and exactly.
So summer 2, I was sort of like, I need to stop being distracted by all of that. I wouldn't say that I was too distracted my first summer, but I need to just completely rule it out and just let whatever happens. The people that I connect with. So we ended up crossing paths quite a few times during that summer, connected. And then it just so happened that I was coming out with a good bit of my friends from Bama for a game. They were playing in Cowboy Stadium, and she was up for that weekend for the night before because Baylor was playing a game. And so I have a really solid core group of friends that I've had for years and years and years. And some of them have moved to different areas, but us all being together in Alabama and all coming out for the game, she ended up meeting the whole core of them. And I think the first or that was like the second night that she came over to hang out and then left, I walked back inside and they all were like standing at the door waiting for me. And they were like, so are you going to date this girl? Or,
You like her.
Because we've met some of the people that you've talked with and stuff, and she's the best person that we've ever met.
The friends know. The friends know.
The friends know.
The friends
Exactly.
know. They always know. They know who wife is. Yeah.
So
exactly.
I, as much as I want to say that I trusted her intuition perfectly, I also still needed some time myself to process it. And so I told her, I think before we ended up leaving, that I was like, hey, I would love to continue pursuing a conversation with you and talking. I tried to use all these like appropriate terms that were.
I left that conversation so confused.
You were like, does he like me? Does he not like me?
Like, just tell me you like me.
Yeah, just tell me I'm pretty and you like me. Shoot.
Yeah.
Didn't do that very well, but I was like, you know what? I'll make it clear later. Ended up going out to see her a couple of times my senior year while she was in school. And then met some of her friends and some of the people that she, received kind of mentoring from and things like that. They apparently told her that they liked me.
Yeah. Same conversation.
I told her that before we started dating, I wanted to at least meet her parents because they were living in Dallas at the time.
Yeah,
so
that's true.
Flew up in Christmas of 2015.
My dad was like, oh, you want to meet me? Okay. Books flights. Yeah. He's like, bet. Yeah, you're gonna have a conversation with me. You're not gonna do this over the phone. Yeah. My dad is very traditional.
Love it.
Well, and it worked for me because
that's how I was. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So
okay.
Once I talked with their parents and everything, I think they sat me down like the first morning.
They were
like, so what do you think about our daughter? And I was like, oh gosh, I'm just waking up.
Here we go.
Yeah, so we started dating that weekend. So that was December 27th, 2015. We have all these dates memorized because we celebrated them as anniversaries. Dated long distance for a couple of years, then I guess semi-long distance while I was working in East Texas and she was finishing nursing school and starting as a nurse. Then once I moved into Dallas, I accepted a job with the university that I worked at previously. I graduated with my master's and I proposed to her all within 1 week.
Yes.
So that was
and then she got into like CRNA school because she was literally, remember she texted me, she's like, yeah, I'm getting married, just hold on a second, I'll be back. I'm like, okay.
Exactly. Exactly.
So COVID, it was just
COVID, that ruined everything.
That's how we met.
Yeah, that's awesome. So you guys been together for a while, have a pretty solid foundation, known each other for a while, did the kind of similar to kind of how me and my husband now, boyfriend at the time of just, we did long distance, ups and downs, and then we started living together in CRNA school, which was another whole thing when you're used to like long distance. And then I'm broke and I'm like, look, do you have any money? Because I don't have any. And, it's a whole big thing. So it's nice that you guys kind of had that solid foundation. Now, a couple more questions here and then we'll wrap up. But so financially, has that been a big stressor for you guys? Because I mean, finances can destroy marriages in general. So I know probably you guys have like obviously the vision and obviously knowing we're not always going to be here. But how has it been? How has it been financially? Because I know that's a heavy hitter.
Yeah, that was a large like conversation that we had surrounding CRNA school, where we were going to go. We knew loans were going to be a thing. Luckily, though, we had a very strong push towards paying off as much debt as we could, and we didn't kind of care how we did it. And so now that I have this kind of school incentive, financial incentive, that kind of took a lot of that financial burden away, which is part of the reason why we moved. So yeah, that helped. So I ended up taking a travel nurse contract like locally to help save, because I knew, I wanted to cash flow as much as school we possibly could. I didn't want to take out extra loans on top of what we had to. I know that's different for people who are not married, who are single. I can't even imagine how they do it, to be honest with you, with having to take out cost of living on top of school. Kudos to them.
Yeah, that's what I did.
Yeah, oh my goodness. Yeah. Kudos. I couldn't do it. And so I saved. So we kind of gave a rough estimate of how much money we could possibly need to cover the 3 years. In be it that he loses a job and that we're using, just all of these different kind of scenarios. And so we kind of went a little like Dave Ramsey-ish in a sense of we made the emergency fund. We paid down as much debt as we possibly could. We paid off all his student loans. We paid off my car, his car. And so that we could go into school with as little monthly payment, anything as possible. And so a lot of what our conversation surrounds now is like what we're doing per month. So we meet monthly, we do a full breakdown of our expenditure. We kind of track what's school related, what's not school related, and have conversation. And sometimes those conversations are tough to have because he's asking like, what are you spending all this? Why are you going to the hospital cafeteria for almost twice a day? And I'm like, look, I am working a 16-hour shift. I need snacks. Like, I'm hungry.
Yeah.
And he's like, okay, well, what can we do here to provide you snacks to take to clinical? It's just like having those conversations. It's also a lot of the conversation financially that surrounded me is the burden of me not financially contributing. And that has been a lot of the tears and the frustration of our conversation surrounding finances, because I see him working so hard to support me through school, sacrificing him going to school, sacrificing some of the things that he likes to do. Like, he likes to go play golf, and golf is expensive. And so sometimes we can't do that as often as we want to do because I'm in school. And so I always joke, I'm like, I will buy you anything. Please don't divorce me through this time. Please, 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 please. And he's just like, long-term goal. He's very good at like redirecting my, mental spiral to, hey, 3 years from now, we can go on a school vacation.
Yeah,
it's not going to matter. It's not going to matter. I'm doing this now. You're doing this now. So that 10 years from now, 15 years from now, we can have the life that we want to have with the house and the kids and, the cool vacations that we want to have and going to Europe or whatever we want to do. We just need to buckle down now. And so that kind of levels me out a little bit, but there is moments where I do feel a burden on myself that I'm not financially contributing and that I'm preventing him from doing what he wants to do. But again, having that conversation, redirecting thoughts, looking long-term, that has been instrumental in making sure that I don't walk away from conversations, especially financial ones dealing with money, feeling like I'm a continual burden and he's going to leave me.
Yeah, that's hard. Yeah, that's really hard. Yeah. So. Anything to add to that, Zach?
No, I mean, I would say just kind of on top is that I feel very fortunate to have found roles that pay enough to support us throughout this so that we're not having to take out extra cost of living loans and things like that, but realizing that, hey, if that is the need, then we need that.
It's what it is.
Right. But then, it's also kind of a remembrance and recognition of find the things that can still bring enjoyment, but don't cost as much as some of the other things that have historically brought enjoyment. So, then again, it's a remembrance of it's a shared burden, even if one of us feels like the burden is totally on them. It's not just Kate's burden to carry because we're both carrying it. And so,
you're married, that's the thing is like you're married and you're a team and the team member is doing this over here, doesn't have the money bringing in, but this team member, and so I just remembering it as a team and staying focused on that because that can be tough. And I feel for you, Kate, of that feeling of like, I'm useless, I'm not helping, you know what I mean? Even though it's like, and I will say on the other side for being someone that has, went through it, it's so good. It's so good when you get out. It's not about even the material things and all of that. I mean, again, we bought like a flashy car and got married and did all the things after, but just having the ability to afford what you want and save money and pay your loans and travel, like it really is so worth it. And so I'm excited. I'll have to have you guys back in like a year or so. You guys can from now, tell me about the good life and where you guys are at. Zach, do you think she prepped you well for this? Do you feel like you were prepped okay for this? Do you think like, what would you kind of give advice to people who are like, hey, I'm going to go to CRNA school. Like, is this what you expected? Was it worse?
Yeah.
Or
great question. It's a combination of yes and no. So in terms of prep, the logistics of it, yes. I was very understanding of the fact that there was going to be long nights of studying, potential, spouts of her not even being in the house because of going to clinical sites, things like that. I don't I don't think she could have done anything better to prepare for just the chaos of clinical sites being changed and the emotional toll that it would take. I think the only sort of prep that could have been done there that would not have been expected was some sort of, hey, let's build up an emotional bank, right? We've talked about like kind of building these banks of trust and conversation, but building an emotional bank of let's do a million happy things before we get into this, because it's going to just tax on it continually.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so I think the advice that I would share to those who are considering CRNA school and what they then think of when they need to talk to their spouses about it is kind of just a remembrance of when you know that they're on your side, believe that they're on your side. Don't question it, and don't try and over explain guilt or feel like that, right? Like I know that there's been times where she's like, I feel so guilty because of X, Y, and Z. And it's like, you don't need to. We're good. Like, I understand. I knew that this was coming. We talked about this beforehand. So now what I just need you to do is lock in and get going with it, what you need to do. And
Get
just
it
know that
done.
I'm still going to be here on the back end of it. Like, I'm not going anywhere right now. It might feel that there's a distance between us sometimes because of a lack of ability to talk or just timing or whatever it is. I think that if there was any sort of advice I would share for those who would share with their spouses, it's tell them ahead of time, but then also once you've told them, they know.
Yeah.
And check in and be like, hey, you still know that I love you. You still know that I want to I'm excited for what the future is ahead with you, but know that this is just a sucky time for me sometimes. And so not that all CRNA school is sucky,
Yeah.
but yes,
A lot of it is.
A lot of it is.
Yeah,
I don't want to discourage anyone from it because it's a worthwhile pursuit.
Yeah,
but yes.
Yeah, it is. And then I think anything worthwhile, the resilience, the struggle, like all of that. I think I just did so much coaching on, yeah, you're going to suffer, and I went through a lot of things like last year in general. And like, sometimes we're just going to suffer, and we're in a season of that. And what are we going to make it mean? We're going to get through it. You know what I mean? And so I think it's absolutely worthwhile. And, even you can still make it fun going through it with your partner and your best friend and your significant other or whatever. Like, it can still be fun. So Kate, what'd you say?
I was just saying, find times
Yes.
to make it fun, and both of you have to do that.
Yeah.
It cannot be just one person doing it. You can't just say that your spouse has to do it because you've got all these things going on. And you also can't be the one responsible for doing it, because then that means that your spouse is going to feel like they're not contributing to your happiness if you're the only one planning it. So
for sure.
I love that.
Yeah.
Well, Kate, anything else, any last minute pearls or advice or anything you have to give to anybody out there before we jump off?
Oh my goodness. I have so many, but for the biggest one is you can never over communicate to your spouse, and have frequent conversations with them about what this process looks like. I don't think you really understand. I could tell you a million things of how hard it's going to be, but you're really never going to know how hard it is until you're, knee deep into it and you're doing the work, you're going through clinical, you're going through didactic. But again, the biggest thing that you can do to kind of level out feelings of guilt, level out feelings almost like of suffering or frustration is just communicate with your spouse, communicate with your friends, communicate with your family, communicate with your faculty, and make sure everybody's kind of on the same page so that they know how to support you. Because again, they're not going to know if you're just suffering in silence. I feel like that's one of the worst places to be, is when you kind of dig yourself into this big hole and then it all comes out somehow. SRNA depression and suicide is real. It's not something that's benign by any means. So if you're suffering, please communicate to somebody, whether that be your spouse, whether that be some faculty or some friends. So I'm all about, making sure that you're not in that mental depression and finding a way out of that. And then also just making sure that when you get into clinical, and especially for distance sites, finding a way to navigate that with your spouse. And that may look like dividing tasks, like household tasks or role responsibilities, significantly. So they may be doing a lot more, housework or whatever that looks like, versus you doing clinical 4 or 5 days a week. And I think a lot of that, again, is just preparation prior to starting school. So have these conversations. If you're in a relationship with somebody, if you're dating, if you're engaged, sit down now and have that conversation now, so that nothing is a surprise whenever you get into CRNA school and these things do pop up. So, have those conversations today.
I love that. Right now, as you're listening to this,
As you're listening,
go talk to this is like your sign to go talk to your significant other, get them prepped, or even, you know what, if you are in a bad spot with your significant other right now, I hope this episode, like, go talk to them. Like, go be the one to extend the olive branch and the grace and just talk to them. That's really what both of you need as you navigate this time. And, even I find as I, have went from, SRNA to CRNA to wife to mom. I mean, even as a mom, I'm just like, you know what? My house is a mess and there's a few dishes in the sink. And it just, sometimes it just is what it is. We get to decide what we make things mean about who we are and what it is. And the same like applies here. And to piggyback off Kate, because I'm like, again, my platform is you do not have to do this alone. You do not have to struggle alone. You don't have to suffer alone. Like, people are here. I'm here. Reach out to me, whatever. But this was not meant to be walked alone. And if you're spiraling down, like, please reach out and help, because it's legit. And that's why I coach and I mentor, because I don't want anyone to feel how I felt in school or just feel isolated. So absolutely. Well, you guys are an amazing couple. We'll have to do like a vacation or something. Like when you guys, I'm going to crash your guys' vacation or something and hang out. But you guys have been lovely. You have set like so many pearls. I hope y'all took notes, implement these things into your relationships now. And for those of you that are thinking about CRNA school, it's possible. Like, she's in the middle of the middle of the craziness, and they're making it work, right? They're both still standing, even though, and it's marriage. You're going to get annoyed. I mean, it is what it is, but long-term vision. I love that. Your perspective, how you look at things is everything. And I'm just cheering for you guys. And I'm going to keep checking out your journey. So
yeah.
All right.
Thank you so much
Thank
for
you guys.
time.
Absolutely. I'm so glad. Thank you guys so much. All right. I will see everybody on the next episode.